The wrench slipped from my fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. Not because I was clumsy, I'd been fixing cars for 15 years, but because I heard my wife Alicia's voice drifting through the thin wall that separated my workspace from our kitchen. "He's so much better than Joe in every way," she was saying, her voice pitched low but not low enough. "I just want a real man for once, you know?" I crouched there in the dim light, oil stains on my coveralls, listening to my marriage implode through drywall and spite. Nothing like finding out you're not just second best, but apparently not even qualified for the race. The rain hammered against the garage door, and I could hear Alicia's friend Susie giggling on the other end of the phone. These two had been thick as thieves since high school, and Susie had always struck me as the type who'd encourage bad decisions just to watch the fireworks. "When are you going to tell him?" Susie asked, her voice tinny through the speaker. "Soon," Alicia said. "Maybe after the Hendersons' barbecue this weekend. I want to see how he handles himself around real competition first." Real competition. I almost laughed. After 12 years of marriage, she was talking about me like I was a broken-down Ford she wanted to trade in for something with more horsepower. I picked up the wrench and got back to work on Mrs. Patterson's Camry, but my mind was racing. The smart thing would be to confront Alicia right now, demand answers, maybe try to salvage whatever was left of our relationship. But I'd learned a thing or two about people in my 37 years, and the most important lesson was this. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Alicia had just shown me exactly who she was. The next morning, I called my buddy Ray while Alicia was at her job at the hospital. Ray owned the boxing gym where I'd spent most of my 20s getting my face rearranged, and he'd been a cop before that. If anyone could help me figure out what was really going on, it was him. "You sure about what you heard?" Ray asked when I told him about the phone call. "Dead sure," I said. "Question is, what do I do about it?" "Well, you got two choices," Ray said in that gravelly voice of his. "You can confront her now with no proof and watch her lie to your face, or you can get some evidence first." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that'll hold up in divorce court," Ray said. "Look, Joe, I've seen this story 100 times. Wife gets bored, starts looking for excitement, finds some smooth-talking jackass who promises her the moon. You need to know exactly what you're dealing with before you make your move. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through Alicia's phone while she was in the shower. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Text messages with someone named Nolan going back 3 weeks. The early messages were flirty but innocent enough. Compliments about her dress at some hospital fundraiser, jokes about boring spouses. But they escalated quickly. The most recent exchange made my blood run cold. Nolan: "Can't wait to show you what you've been missing." Alicia: "Joe will never suspect. He's too busy with his little garage to notice anything." Nolan: "Saturday night? The motel on Route 9? Alicia: "Perfect. I'll tell him I'm having girls' night with Susie." I screenshotted everything and sent them to my own phone, then deleted the evidence of my snooping. When Alicia came out of the bathroom, toweling her hair, I was sitting on the bed reading a car magazine like nothing had happened. "The Hendersons' barbecue is tomorrow," she said, not looking at me. "You're still coming, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," I said. She nodded and went to her closet, probably picking out something nice to wear for Nolan. I watched her move around the bedroom, this woman I'd loved for over a decade, who was planning to humiliate me in front of our entire neighborhood, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Saturday evening arrived gray and muggy, the kind of weather that makes everyone irritable. The Hendersons lived 3 houses down from us in our quiet cul-de-sac, and their backyard barbecues were legendary neighborhood events. Everyone would be there. The Pattersons, the Kellys, old Mrs. Tully, who knew everyone's business, and apparently Nolan. I'd looked him up online after finding the texts. Nolan Briggs, owner of Briggs Auto Sales on the other side of town. 40 years old, divorced, the kind of guy who wore gold chains and called everyone buddy. His dealership specialized in luxury pre-owned vehicles, which was a fancy way of saying he sold overpriced used cars to people who couldn't afford new ones. Alicia spent an hour getting ready, putting on a sundress that showed off her figure and enough makeup to stop traffic. She looked beautiful, and that made what was coming even worse. "You look nice," I said when she came downstairs. "Thanks," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. The Hendersons' backyard was already crowded when we arrived. Bob Henderson was manning the grill, beer in one hand and spatula in the other, while his wife Linda played hostess. The usual crowd was there, plus a few faces I didn't recognize, including Nolan. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, tan, wearing an expensive polo shirt and khakis that probably cost more than I made in a week. He had the kind of smile that car salesmen practice in the mirror, all teeth and no warmth. "Joe," Bob called out when he saw me. Grab a beer and come tell me what you think about this new marinade." I was halfway to the grill when I felt someone grab my arm. It was Susie, looking unusually nervous. "Hey, Joe," she said, glancing around like she was checking for eavesdroppers. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure," I said. She led me over to a corner of the yard, near Linda's prize-winning rose bushes. "Look, I know this might sound weird, but do you ever think about what it would be like if you weren't married?" I stared at her. Susie was attractive in an obvious sort of way. Blonde hair, tight clothes, the kind of woman who turned heads at the grocery store. But she was also Alicia's best friend, which made this conversation very interesting. "That's a strange question," I said. "I mean, hypothetically," she said, moving closer. "Like, if you were single, would you ever consider dating someone like me?" Before I could answer, I heard Alicia's laugh from across the yard. She was standing next to Nolan, her hand on his arm, looking up at him like he'd just said the funniest thing in the world. "You know what, Susie?" I said, loud enough for several people to hear. "I think you're absolutely right. Life's too short to waste on people who don't appreciate what they have." Susie's eyes widened, and I saw Alicia's head snap in our direction. Perfect. I spent the next hour playing the part of the charming, available husband. I complimented Susie's dress, brought her drinks, laughed at her jokes. It was all theater, but effective theater. I could see Alicia watching us from across the yard, her face getting darker by the minute. Meanwhile, she wasn't exactly being subtle about her own flirtation. She and Nolan were practically attached at the hip, and their body language was screaming affair to anyone with eyes. I saw Mrs. Tully whispering to her husband, probably already composing the gossip she'd spread at tomorrow's church service. The breaking point came when Bob Henderson, 3 beers deep and feeling philosophical, decided to make a toast. "To all the happy couples here tonight," he announced, raising his bottle, "and to the idea that we should all appreciate what we have before it's gone." Everyone raised their drinks, but the irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Alicia was standing next to Nolan, I was next to Susie, and the whole neighborhood was watching this domestic drama unfold in real time. That's when Nolan made his move. "You know, Bob," he said in that smooth car salesman voice, "sometimes people outgrow what they have. Sometimes they need an upgrade." The conversation around us died. Everyone sensed that something significant was happening, even if they didn't know exactly what. "Is that right?" I said, looking directly at him. "Oh, absolutely," Nolan said, his arm sliding around Alicia's waist. "Take cars, for example. You might start with a reliable sedan, but eventually you want something with more performance." Alicia was looking at me with a mixture of defiance and fear, like she wanted to see how I'd react to this public challenge. The old Joe might have made a scene, might have thrown a punch or caused a spectacle, but the old Joe was gone. Instead, I smiled. "You're absolutely right, Nolan," I said. "Sometimes you do need to trade up. The question is, how do you know if what you're getting is actually better or just shinier?" Sunday morning arrived with the kind of brutal clarity that follows a night of bad decisions. Alicia had barely spoken to me after the barbecue, and she was already gone when I woke up, probably to debrief with Susie about the previous evening's drama. I made coffee and sat in my kitchen, staring out at the Hendersons' backyard where the remnants of last night's party still littered the lawn. Plastic cups, paper plates, and the ashes of my marriage. My phone buzzed. Ray. "How'd it go last night?" he asked. "About like you'd expect," I said. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore." "That's good," Ray said. "Means she's getting sloppy. Overconfident people make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that give you leverage," Ray said. "Meet me at the gym in an hour. We need to talk strategy." Ray's boxing gym was in the old part of town, wedged between a laundromat and a pizza place that had seen better decades. The building smelled like sweat and leather and the dreams of fighters who'd never quite made it big. It was the kind of place where you could think clearly, away from the suburban pretense and social media performance art that had infected the rest of my life. "Here's what's going to happen," Ray said as we sat in his cluttered office. "She's going to ask for a divorce, probably within the next week. She'll try to make it seem like it's mutual, like you both just grew apart. And then? Then she'll try to take you for everything you're worth," Ray said. "The house, half your business, alimony. She'll paint you as the boring husband who drove her away, and Nolan as her knight in shining armor." I thought about that for a moment. "What if we don't let it get that far?" "What do you mean?" "What if we make her come to us?" I said. "What if we make her so desperate to get out that she'll take whatever we offer just to end it quickly?" Ray leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Now you're thinking like a chess player instead of a boxer. What did you have in mind?" That afternoon, I put the first part of my plan into action. I drove to the motel on Route 9, the same one mentioned in Alicia's texts. It was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for a cheap affair. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign, rooms rented by the hour. I parked across the street and waited. At 6:30, Nolan's silver BMW pulled into the lot. At 6:45, Alicia's Honda followed. I watched my wife of 12 years walk across that cracked asphalt parking lot and knock on room 237. Watched Nolan open the door and pull her inside. I sat there for another hour, taking pictures with my phone's camera. The BMW, the Honda, the motel sign, the room number, evidence that would hold up in any divorce proceeding. But I wasn't planning on divorce proceedings. At 8 o'clock, I walked across the street to Nolan's BMW. The car was his pride and joy. I could tell from the way he'd parked it under the only working streetlight, away from other vehicles. Probably cost him $60,000, which was more than most people in our town made in a year. I took out my keys and dragged them along the entire passenger side, leaving a deep scratch that ran from the front bumper to the back. Then I did the same thing to the driver's side. When I was finished, I pulled out a piece of paper and wrote a note. Hope your night's as smooth as your paint job. A concerned citizen. I tucked the note under his windshield wiper and walked back to my truck. Monday morning, Alicia was unusually quiet at breakfast. She kept checking her phone and glancing at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said, but her voice was tight. How was girls' night with Susie? She froze with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. What? Saturday night, I said innocently. You said you were having girls' night with Susie. Oh, right, it was... Fine. I nodded and went back to reading the sports section, but I could feel her watching me, trying to figure out if I knew something. The call came that afternoon while I was working on a transmission. Alicia, and she sounded rattled. Joe, we need to talk, she said. I'm kind of busy right now. Can it wait until tonight? No, she said. It can't wait. I'm coming home. She arrived 20 minutes later, still in her hospital scrubs, her face flushed with anger and something else. Fear, maybe. Someone vandalized Nolan's car last night, she said without preamble. That's terrible, I said. Did they catch who did it? No, they didn't catch who did it, she snapped. But whoever it was left a note, a threatening note. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and gave her my full attention. What kind of threatening note? The kind that suggests someone knows something they shouldn't know. We stared at each other across my garage, the air thick with unspoken accusations. She was trying to read my face, looking for any sign that I was behind the vandalism, but I'd had years of practice hiding my thoughts from her. I don't know what you want me to say, Alicia, I said finally. If someone damaged his car, he should call the police. He did call the police, she said. They said without witnesses or security footage, there's not much they can do. Well, that's unfortunate. She took a step closer. Joe, if you know something about this... What would I know about it? I interrupted. I was here all evening, working on the Patterson's Camry. You can ask Mrs. Patterson if you want. She stopped by around 9 to check on the progress. This was true. Mrs. Patterson had indeed stopped by, though she'd left by 8:30. But Alicia didn't need to know that detail. Besides, I continued, why would I care about some random guy's car getting keyed? I don't even know the man. Another lie, but a necessary one. Alicia searched my face for a long moment, then seemed to deflate. You're right, she said. I'm sorry. I'm just stressed about work. Of course you are, I said. These things happen. I'm sure whoever did it had their reasons. That evening, Alicia was distracted and jumpy. She kept checking her phone, probably texting with Nolan about the car situation. I made dinner, spaghetti and meatballs, her favorite, and we ate in relative silence. Joe, she said as I was clearing the dishes, I've been thinking about us, about our marriage. Here it comes, I thought. What about it? I think we need to talk about where we're going, she said. Whether we're still compatible. I set down the plates and turned to face her. Are you asking for a divorce, Alicia? She looked startled by my directness. I don't know. Maybe. I just think we've grown apart. Grown apart, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? What do you mean? I could have confronted her then. Could have pulled out my phone and shown her the screenshots of her texts, the photos from the motel. Could have ended this charade right there. Instead, I smiled. I think you're right, I said. We have grown apart. The question is, what are we going to do about it? She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. You agree? Alicia, I want you to be happy, I said. If you're not happy with me, then maybe we should consider our options. Our options? Separation, I said. Maybe some time apart would help us figure out what we really want. I could see the wheels turning in her head. This was easier than she'd expected. No drama, no begging, no messy emotional scenes, just a reasonable discussion between two adults who'd grown apart. That might be good, she said carefully. How would it work? Well, one of us would have to move out temporarily, I said. And since this is your idea, I think it should be you. Her face fell. Me? But this is my house too. Of course it is, I said. But I need to be here for the business. Customers expect to find me in the garage. You, on the other hand, could stay anywhere. I can't afford a hotel indefinitely, Joe. Then maybe you could stay with a friend, I suggested. Someone who could help you figure out what you really want. The implication hung in the air between us. She could stay with Nolan, test drive her new relationship without the messy complications of divorce proceedings. I'll think about it, she said. Take your time, I said. But not too much time. If we're doing this, we should do it right. That night she slept in the guest bedroom. I lay in our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her move around down the hall. She was probably texting Nolan, telling him about our conversation, making plans. Let her plan, I thought. Let her think she's in control. Because tomorrow, the real game would begin. Tuesday morning brought the kind of news that spreads through a small town like wildfire. Mrs. Tully called while I was having my first cup of coffee. Joe, dear, she said in that voice people use when they are about to deliver gossip disguised as concern. I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right between you and Alicia? Why do you ask, Mrs. Tully? Well, I couldn't help but notice at the Hendersons' barbecue that she seemed very friendly with that car dealer fellow. Mrs. Tully was 73 years old and had lived in our neighborhood longer than anyone. She knew everyone's business, and more importantly, she wasn't afraid to share it. Nolan Briggs, I said. Yeah, they seemed to hit it off. Oh my, Mrs. Tully said, and I could practically hear her clutching her pearls. Joe, you know I don't like to spread rumors, but Linda Henderson mentioned that they exchanged phone numbers. Did they now? And then yesterday I saw Alicia leaving in the middle of the afternoon, all dressed up. She looked like she was going somewhere special. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Mrs. Tully was fishing for information, but she was also giving me valuable intelligence about how the neighborhood grapevine was processing recent events. Mrs. Tully, I said, I appreciate you looking out for me. But Alicia's a grown woman. If she wants to make friends with car dealers, that's her business. Of course, dear, she said, but I could tell she was disappointed by my lack of drama. I just wanted you to know that people are talking. I'm sure they are. After I hung up, I called Ray. The neighborhood watch is activated, I told him. Mrs. Tully just called to warn me about Alicia's friendship with Nolan. Good, Ray said. That means word is spreading. How's Alicia handling the pressure? She asked for a separation last night. Already? Damn, she's moving fast. Too fast, I said. She's making this easy. That afternoon, I implemented the next phase of my plan. I drove to the high school where our 20-year reunion was scheduled for Saturday night. The reunion committee was meeting to finalize details, and I'd volunteered months ago to help with the audio-visual setup. Sarah Chen, the committee chairwoman, greeted me at the gym entrance. Joe, thank goodness you're here. We're having trouble with the projector. I spent 2 hours getting their equipment working properly, testing the microphone system, making sure everything was connected correctly. While I worked, I made casual conversation with the other volunteers about who was coming, what the program would look like, how the slideshow of old photos would work. We're expecting about 200 people, Sarah said, including some faces we haven't seen in years. Should be fun, I said. Will there be time for people to share updates? You know, talk about what they've been up to? Absolutely, Sarah said. We're planning an open mic session after dinner. Anyone who wants to share can take the stage. Perfect. Wednesday evening, Alicia came home with 2 suitcases. I've decided to take you up on your suggestion, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. About the separation. Where will you be staying? Susie offered to let me use her guest room, she said. Another lie. I'd driven past Susie's house that morning and seen her husband's car in the driveway. Susie wasn't offering her guest room to anyone, especially not to a friend having an affair. That's nice of her, I said. It's just temporary, Alicia said quickly, until we figure things out. Of course. I watched her pack her things, moving through our bedroom like she was already a stranger here. She took her jewelry, her favorite clothes, the photo of us from our honeymoon that had sat on her nightstand for 12 years. Alicia, I said as she was loading her car, can I ask you something? She paused with a suitcase in her hands. What? Are you happy? The question seemed to catch her off guard. What do you mean? I mean, are you happy with the choices you're making? Do you feel good about how things are going? She stared at me for a long moment, and for just an instant, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the brittle confidence of someone who'd already committed to a course of action. I'm doing what I need to do, she said. Okay, I said. Just remember, some choices can't be undone. She drove away without looking back. That night, I had dinner with Ray at Murphy's Bar, the kind of place where the beer was cold and the conversation was honest. So she's moved in with the car dealer? Ray asked. Officially, she's staying with Susie, I said. But yeah, she's probably at Nolan's place right now, playing house. How do you feel about that? It was a good question. How did I feel? Angry, certainly. Betrayed, obviously. But underneath those emotions was something else, something colder and more calculating. I feel like she's giving me exactly what I need, I said. Ray raised an eyebrow. Which is? Ammunition. Thursday brought more neighborhood intelligence, courtesy of Bob Henderson, who stopped by the garage to pick up his wife's minivan. Joe, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Linda and I are really sorry about what happened at the barbecue, he said. What do you mean? That Nolan character, Bob said. The way he was all over Alicia, making those comments about upgrading. It was inappropriate as hell. I appreciate that, Bob. Linda did some asking around, Bob continued. Turns out the guy's got a reputation. He's been divorced twice, both times for cheating, and his business practices are questionable. Questionable how? Let's just say he's not the most honest car dealer in town, Bob said, which is saying something considering the competition. I filed that information away for future use. Friday afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Joe, this is Nolan Briggs. I almost laughed. The man himself calling me directly. What can I do for you, Nolan? I think we should talk, he said, man to man. About what? About Alicia, he said. About the situation. What situation is that? There was a pause. Look, Joe, I know this is awkward, but Alicia and I, we've developed feelings for each other. Have you now? I want to do this the right way, Nolan said. I respect you and I respect your marriage, but sometimes people fall in love, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He was calling me to ask for permission to steal my wife, like he was doing me a favor by being honest about it. Nolan, I said, I appreciate the call, but if Alicia wants to be with you, that's between you and her. You don't need my blessing. I just want to make sure there are no hard feelings, he said. Oh, there are definitely feelings, I said. But don't worry about them. You'll find out what they are soon enough. I hung up before he could respond. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you believe in fresh starts and second chances. The high school gym was decorated with balloons and streamers in our old school colors, and a DJ was setting up in the corner where the basketball hoop used to be. I arrived early to help with the final setup, wearing my best suit and a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The reunion committee was buzzing with excitement, greeting old classmates, taking photos, catching up on 20 years of life. Joe, Sarah Chen called out when she saw me. You clean up nice. Is Alicia coming? She'll be here, I said. Wouldn't miss it for the world. And she would be here, because 3 days ago I'd sent her a text from a burner phone pretending to be someone from the reunion committee, reminding her about the event and mentioning that several people had specifically asked about her. Alicia had always been vain about her high school popularity. She'd been homecoming queen, head cheerleader, the girl everyone wanted to be friends with. The idea of missing a chance to show off her success to old classmates would be unbearable to her. At 7:30, she walked through the gym doors. She looked stunning, wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, her jewelry expensive. She looked like someone who'd won at life. Nolan was with her. He was wearing an expensive suit and that practiced smile, playing the role of the successful businessman who'd swept the beautiful woman off her feet. They moved through the crowd like celebrities at a premiere, accepting congratulations and admiration from people who didn't know the real story. I watched from across the room, nursing a beer and making small talk with old teammates from the football team. Several people asked about Alicia, and I gave them the same answer. She's doing great, living her best life. The dinner portion of the evening went smoothly. Alicia and Nolan sat at a table with some of her old cheerleader friends, holding hands and whispering like teenagers. She kept glancing in my direction, probably trying to gauge my reaction to their public display. I just smiled and waved whenever she looked over. After dinner, Sarah Chen took the microphone for the program portion of the evening. Before we get to the dancing, she announced, we have a few special presentations. First, let's take a look at some photos from our senior year. The lights dimmed and the projector screen filled with images from 2003. Prom photos, graduation pictures, candid shots from parties and football games. The crowd laughed and cheered as they recognized younger versions of themselves. Then Sarah announced the open mic session. Anyone who wants to share an update about their life is welcome to take the stage, she said. Tell us about your career, your family, your adventures. We want to hear it all. Several classmates took turns at the microphone, sharing stories about their jobs, their children, their travels. The crowd was warm and receptive, applauding each speaker. Finally, I stood up. I'd like to say something, I announced, walking toward the stage. The gym fell quiet as I took the microphone. 200 faces turned toward me, including Alicia's. She looked nervous, like she sensed something was about to happen, but couldn't quite put her finger on what. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said. It's been wonderful seeing everyone, catching up on old times. 20 years gives you a lot of perspective on life, on what really matters. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the crowd. I want to talk about loyalty, I continued, about the people who stand by you when times get tough, and the people who don't. Alicia's face had gone pale. Nolan was whispering something in her ear, probably telling her they should leave. Some of you might have noticed that my wife Alicia is here tonight with her new boyfriend, I said conversationally. They make a lovely couple, don't they? A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't the kind of update people usually shared at reunions. Now, I know what you're thinking, I continued. This is awkward. And you're right, it is awkward. But I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Nolan publicly for helping me understand what kind of person I married. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. You see, I have some photos here that really tell the story better than I ever could. The first image appeared on the projector screen. Nolan's BMW in the motel parking lot. The crowd gasped. The second image, Alicia's Honda parked next to it. The third image, the motel sign with its hourly rates clearly visible. This was taken last Saturday night, I said into the microphone, my voice calm and conversational, while Alicia was supposedly having girls' night with Susie. Alicia was on her feet now, her face flushed with humiliation and rage. Joe, stop this right now. Oh, I'm just getting started, I said. The next slide was a screenshot of her text messages with Nolan. Joe will never suspect, I read aloud. He's too busy with his little garage to notice anything. The gym was dead silent now, 200 people watching this domestic drama unfold in real time. Nolan stood up, his face red with anger. You son of a bitch. Now, I said. Let's keep this civil. After all, you're the one who called me to talk man-to-man about stealing my wife. That got another gasp from the crowd. The thing is, I continued, I want everyone here to understand what kind of people they are. Alicia didn't just cheat on me. She planned to humiliate me, to take me for everything I'm worth, to destroy my reputation while she rode off into the sunset with her upgrade. I clicked to the next slide, bank statements showing Alicia's recent spending sprees. She's been spending our money on new clothes, jewelry, dinners with Nolan, preparing for her new life while lying to my face every single day. Alicia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Please, Joe, please stop. And Nolan here, I said, turning toward the car dealer. Well, let's just say he's not quite the successful businessman he pretends to be. The next slide showed a newspaper article about complaints filed against Briggs Auto Sales with the Better Business Bureau. Turns out our boy Nolan has been selling cars with rolled-back odometers, hiding flood damage, forging inspection certificates, real stand-up guy. Nolan was moving toward the stage now, his fists clenched. I'm going to kill you. But Ray stepped out of the crowd, blocking his path. I'd asked my old friend to be here tonight, just in case things got physical. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Ray said quietly. So here's what's going to happen, I said into the microphone. Alicia is going to file for divorce, and she's going to accept whatever settlement I offer, because if she doesn't, all of this evidence goes to her employer, her family, and everyone else in town who might be interested. I clicked to the final slide, a photo of Alicia and Nolan kissing in the motel parking lot. And Nolan is going to stay far away from me and my business, because if he doesn't, I might have to share what I know about his creative accounting practices with some people who take that sort of thing very seriously. The gym was still silent, 200 people processing what they'd just witnessed. Thank you all for your attention, I said, setting down the microphone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I walked off the stage and headed for the exit, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 reputations and the shocked whispers of my former classmates. Outside in the parking lot, I could hear shouting from inside the gym, probably Alicia and Nolan trying to do damage control, but it was too late for that. The story would be all over town by morning. I got in my truck and drove home, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sunday morning arrived with 17 missed calls and 43 text messages on my phone. Word of the reunion incident had spread beyond the gymnasium walls, thanks to social media and the town's efficient gossip network. Most of the messages were from people I barely knew, offering support or asking for details. A few were from Alicia, alternating between rage and desperate pleas. One was from my lawyer, who'd apparently heard about the evening's events and wanted to discuss next steps. But the most interesting message was from my brother Danny. "We need to talk. Meet me at Rosie's Diner at noon." Danny and I hadn't spoken in 6 months, not since our argument about money. He'd wanted to borrow $10,000 to invest in some get-rich-quick scheme, and I'd refused. We'd said some harsh things to each other, and the relationship had been strained ever since. But family was family, and Sunday dinner at Rosie's had been our tradition for years. I arrived at the diner to find Danny already waiting in our usual booth, nervously stirring sugar into his coffee. He looked older than his 34 years, worn down by a series of failed business ventures and bad decisions. "Hell of a show last night," he said without preamble. News travels fast. "Joe," Danny said, leaning across the table, "I need to tell you something about Alicia and that car dealer." Something in his tone made me pay attention. "What about them?" "I might have, inadvertently, helped them get together." I set down my coffee cup. "What do you mean, helped them?" Danny couldn't meet my eyes. "Remember a few months ago when I asked you for that loan? For the investment opportunity?" "Yeah." "Well, the investment was with Nolan Briggs. He was putting together this deal, buying up properties around the lake, planning to flip them for vacation rentals." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Go on." "When you said no to the loan, I was desperate. I'd already promised Nolan I was in for 10 grand, and I didn't have it. So what did you do?" "I told him about you and Alicia," Danny said miserably. "About how successful your garage was, how much money you guys probably had saved up. I thought maybe if he got to know you both, he might be willing to let me in on the deal for less money." The pieces were falling into place now. "You introduced them." "At the hospital fundraiser 3 months ago," Danny said. "I brought Nolan as my guest, made sure he met Alicia. I talked you up, told him what a great couple you were, how solid your marriage was." I stared at my brother across the diner table, this man I'd grown up with, played catch with, defended against bullies. "You set up my wife to be seduced by a con man because you wanted to make money." "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Danny said. "I thought he'd try to get close to both of you, maybe offer you some investment opportunities. I never thought he'd—" "You never thought he'd what? Steal my wife?" "I'm sorry, Joe. I'm so fucking sorry." The waitress came by to refill our coffee, pretending not to notice the tension at our table. After she left, I leaned back in the booth and studied my brother's face. "How much do you owe him?" $15,000, Danny said. "The original 10 plus interest." "And if you don't pay?" "He's threatened to break my legs," Danny said. "But after last night, I don't think that's my biggest problem anymore." He was right about that. Nolan had bigger concerns now than collecting debts from small-time losers like my brother. "Danny," I said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. You're going to help me finish what we started last night." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're going to help me destroy Nolan Briggs completely." Monday morning brought a visit from Alicia. She showed up at my garage while I was working on a brake job, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, her expensive dress wrinkled. "Joe, we need to talk," she said. I didn't look up from the brake pads I was replacing. "I'm busy." "Please," she said, and her voice cracked. 5 minutes. I set down my tools and wiped my hands on a shop rag. "What do you want, Alicia?" "I want to apologize," she said. "For everything. For the affair, for the lies, for the way I treated you." "Okay." "That's it? Just okay?" I shrugged. "What do you want me to say? You're sorry you got caught?" "I'm sorry I did it in the first place," she said. "Joe, I made a terrible mistake. I got caught up in the excitement, the attention. Nolan made me feel special." "And I didn't?" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "You did. You do. I forgot. You forgot you were married. I forgot how good I had it, she said. Joe, please, can we try to work this out? Can we go to counseling, try to rebuild what we had? I looked at this woman I'd loved for over a decade, this person who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my bank account, and felt absolutely nothing. No, I said. No? No, we can't work this out. No, we can't go to counseling. No, we can't rebuild anything. Her face crumpled. Why not? Because you showed me who you really are, I said. And I believe you. Joe, please. Here's what's going to happen, I interrupted. You're going to file for divorce. You're going to accept a settlement that gives you enough money to start over somewhere else, and you're going to stay away from me and my business. What if I don't? Then everyone in town gets to see the rest of the photos I took at that motel, I said, including the ones where you and Nolan are doing things that would make your mother disown you. She stared at me in horror. You wouldn't. Try me. She left without another word. That afternoon, I put the next phase of my plan into action. I called the county health department and reported concerns about the sanitation practices at Briggs Auto Sales. I called the state environmental agency and reported possible groundwater contamination from improperly disposed automotive fluids. I called the fire marshal and expressed concerns about blocked exits and overcrowded conditions. None of these complaints were false. Nolan's dealership was a dump, and it wouldn't take much investigation to find legitimate violations, but I wasn't done yet. Tuesday evening, Danny and I met at Ray's gym to finalize our strategy. Here's what we know, Ray said, spreading papers across his desk. Nolan Briggs is leveraged up to his eyeballs. The dealership is mortgaged, his house is mortgaged, he's got credit card debt, car loans, and at least 3 outstanding lawsuits from customers who claim he sold them defective vehicles. So he's broke, I said. Worse than broke, Ray said. He's been using money from new car sales to pay off old debts, which means he's basically running a Ponzi scheme. What about the lake property investment? Danny asked. That's the interesting part, Ray said. Turns out Nolan doesn't own any lake property. He's been taking money from investors like Danny, promising to buy properties that don't exist. So it's fraud, I said. Textbook fraud, Ray agreed. The question is, how do we use this information? I thought about that for a moment. We don't report him to the police. We do something better. Which is? We make him desperate. Wednesday morning, I implemented the final phase of my plan. I called Nolan's biggest creditor, the bank that held the mortgage on his dealership, and anonymously reported that he was using customer deposits for personal expenses. I called his insurance company and suggested they investigate some suspicious claims he'd filed over the past year. I called the local newspaper and gave them a tip about a successful businessman who might not be as successful as he appeared. By Thursday, Nolan's world was starting to collapse. The health department had shut down his service bays pending a full inspection. The environmental agency had placed liens on his property. The fire marshal had cited him for multiple safety violations, and the bank had called in his loan. Friday afternoon, he showed up at my garage. You son of a bitch, he said, storming through the open bay door. You did this. I was working under the hood of a Chevy pickup, and I didn't bother looking up. Did what? You know what? He said. The health department, the fire marshal, the bank, this is all you. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but it sounds like you're having a rough week. I'm going to destroy you, Nolan said. I'm going to take everything you have. That's when I finally looked up from the engine. With what money? His face went red. What? I said, with what money? I repeated. From what I hear, you're about to lose your business, your house, and probably your freedom when the fraud charges get filed. There are no fraud charges. Yet, I said. But give it time. These things have a way of snowballing. Nolan took a step toward me, his fists clenched. You think you're so smart. Smarter than you, I said. Smart enough not to steal another man's wife without understanding the consequences. Alicia came to me, he said. She wanted out of your pathetic marriage. Is that what she told you? I laughed. Nolan, you were never anything more than a midlife crisis with a fancy car. She would have gotten bored with you in 6 months and moved on to the next sucker. You're lying. Am I? Then where is she now? He didn't answer, but his face told me everything I needed to know. Alicia had abandoned ship as soon as his financial problems became public knowledge. Here's some free advice, I said. Leave town, tonight, because tomorrow everyone's going to know exactly what kind of man you really are. He stood there for a moment, breathing hard, probably calculating whether he could take me in a fight. But Ray chose that moment to walk into the garage, and Nolan's courage evaporated. Problem here, Joe? Ray asked. No problem, I said. Mr. Briggs was just leaving. Nolan looked at both of us, then turned and walked away without another word. Saturday morning, I woke up to find a moving truck parked outside Nolan's house. By evening, he was gone, leaving behind a trail of debts and angry customers. The dealership closed permanently the following week, and Alicia, she filed for divorce on Monday, accepting my settlement offer without negotiation. She moved back to her mother's house in another state, effectively disappearing from my life. But I wasn't finished yet, because on Sunday evening, I got a call that changed everything. Joe? It was Susie, Alicia's former best friend. I need to tell you something about what really happened. Meet me at the lake house, Susie said, her voice shaking. The old Morrison place. You know the one. I knew it. The Morrison Lake House had been abandoned for years, a relic from the town's more prosperous past when wealthy families built summer retreats on the water. Now it was just a decaying monument to better times, the kind of place teenagers used for parties and adults used for things they didn't want their neighbors to see. Why there? I asked. Because we need privacy, Susie said, and because there are other people who need to hear what I have to say. What people? Just come, she said. 9 o'clock, and Joe, bring Ray. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone, trying to piece together what Susie might want to tell me. She'd been Alicia's closest friend since high school, the one who'd supposedly offered her guest room during the separation. But I'd suspected from the beginning that Susie knew more about the affair than she'd let on. Maybe it was time to find out exactly how much she knew. I called Ray and told him about the conversation. Sounds like a setup, he said. Maybe, I said, but I'm curious enough to find out. Then we go prepared, Ray said, and we don't go alone. At 8:30, Ray and I drove out to Morrison Lake in his pickup truck. The lake was about 15 minutes outside town, surrounded by pine trees and accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through the forest. The Morrison house sat on a small peninsula, isolated from the other properties by thick woods and expensive privacy. It was the perfect place for secrets. We parked behind a stand of trees and approached the house on foot. Lights were on inside, and I could see several cars in the driveway. Susie's red Camaro, a blue sedan I didn't recognize, and surprisingly, my brother Danny's beat-up Ford. Danny's here, I told Ray. Interesting, Ray said. What do you think that means? I think it means this is bigger than just Susie wanting to confess. We circled the house, checking for other vehicles or people, but the property seemed secure. Finally, we approached the front door. Susie answered before we could knock. Joe, she said, and I was shocked by her appearance. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past week. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, her clothes wrinkled. Thank God you came. What's this about, Susie? Come inside, she said. Everyone's waiting. The lake house's main room was a large space with vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. In better days, it had probably been elegant. Now it just looked sad and neglected, like everything else in our town. Danny was sitting on a couch near the fireplace, looking nervous. Next to him was a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, brown hair, expensive clothes. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. Joe, Ray, Susie said, I'd like you to meet Karen Willis. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen Willis was Nolan's ex-wife, the one he'd divorced 2 years ago under mysterious circumstances. Mrs. Willis, I said, I wasn't expecting to see you here. I bet you weren't, she said, and her voice was cold as winter. But after what happened at your reunion last weekend, I decided it was time to tell the truth about a few things. What truth? Susie gestured for us to sit down. The truth about Nolan Briggs, the truth about your wife's affair, and the truth about who really orchestrated this whole thing. Ray and I exchanged glances, but took seats across from the others. Start talking, I said. Susie took a deep breath. Joe, what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear, but you deserve to know what really happened. I'm listening. The affair between Alicia and Nolan wasn't random, Susie said. It wasn't just two people who met and fell in love. It was planned, orchestrated. By who? By me. The room fell silent except for the sound of wind through the pine trees outside. You? I said. I set them up, Susie said. I encouraged Alicia to meet Nolan, pushed her to spend time with him, convinced her that she deserved better than what she had with you. Why? Susie's face crumpled. Because I was jealous. Because I've been in love with you for 20 years, and I couldn't stand watching you be happy with her. The confession hung in the air like smoke from a fire. I stared at this woman I'd known since high school, this person who'd been in my house hundreds of times, who'd shared family dinners and holiday celebrations, who'd been my wife's maid of honor. You destroyed my marriage because you had a crush on me? It wasn't a crush, Susie said. It was love, real love, and I watched you waste it on someone who didn't appreciate you. So you decided to break us up? I decided to show you who she really was, Susie said. I thought if you saw her true nature, you'd realize that I was the one who really understood you. Ray leaned forward. How did Nolan fit into this plan? Karen Willis spoke up. Because Susie needed a weapon, and Nolan was the perfect weapon. What do you mean? My ex-husband is a predator, Karen said. He targets married women, seduces them, uses them for money and status, then discards them when he gets bored. He did it to me, and he's done it to at least 6 other women that I know of. And Susie knew this? Susie hired him, Karen said. She paid him $5,000 to seduce your wife. The room started spinning. I felt like I'd been sucker punched by information I couldn't process. That's not true, I said. It is true, Danny said quietly. I was there when they made the deal. I turned to look at my brother. You were part of this? Not intentionally, Danny said. Remember when I asked you for that loan? I was desperate, so I went to Susie for help. She said she'd lend me the money if I helped her with something. Which was? Introducing Nolan to you and Alicia, Danny said. She wanted it to look natural, like a coincidence. So I brought him to the hospital fundraiser and made sure he met your wife. And then? Then Susie took over, Danny said. She spent weeks working on Alicia, telling her she was too good for you, that she deserved someone more exciting. She arranged for them to run into each other at the grocery store, at the gym, at restaurants. She made it seem like fate. I looked at Susie, this woman who'd been my wife's best friend, who'd eaten at my table and laughed at my jokes and pretended to care about my happiness. You manipulated everyone, I said. I freed you, Susie said. I showed you what kind of person Alicia really was. Deep down, she was always capable of cheating. I just gave her the opportunity. And you thought what? That I'd come running to you afterward? I thought you'd see that I was the one who really loved you, Susie said. I thought you'd realize that I'd been there all along, supporting you, caring about you. Karen Willis laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's exactly what she told Nolan, that once you found out about the affair, you'd need someone to comfort you, someone who understood you. But it didn't work out that way, Ray said. No, Susie said. It didn't work out that way at all. Because Joe didn't fall apart, Karen said. He got revenge. And when he destroyed Nolan publicly, he destroyed Susie's plan too. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark water of the lake. Everything I thought I knew about the past few months was a lie. My wife's affair hadn't been a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis. It had been a conspiracy, orchestrated by someone I'd trusted. Where's Nolan now? I asked without turning around. Gone, Karen said. He left town after you ruined him. Probably moved on to the next small town, the next group of victims. And Alicia? She has no idea, Susie said. She thinks the affair was real, that Nolan actually cared about her. She doesn't know she was just a pawn in my plan. I turned back to face the room. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm pregnant, Susie said. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? I'm pregnant, she repeated. With Nolan's baby. Ray whistled low. Jesus Christ. It wasn't supposed to happen, Susie said. It was just supposed to be business, but Nolan, he has a way of making women feel special, even when you know better. So you fell for your own weapon, I said. I fell for the same lies I helped him tell your wife, Susie said. And now I'm alone, pregnant, and everyone in town knows I helped destroy your marriage. Good, I said. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. Joe, please. I know I made mistakes, but... Mistakes? I interrupted. You didn't make mistakes, Susie. You made choices. You chose to destroy my marriage. You chose to manipulate my wife. You chose to pay a con man to seduce her. You chose to betray every friendship you ever had. I was in love with you. No, I said. You were obsessed with me. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, but Danny stood up to block my path. Joe, wait, he said. There's more. More what? More people involved, Danny said. The plan was bigger than just Susie and Nolan. I stopped. What do you mean? Karen Willis opened her purse and pulled out a manila folder. Nolan kept records of all his schemes, names, dates, payments, photographs, everything. She handed me the folder. Inside were dozens of documents, bank statements, contracts, photographs, and a list of names. My name was on the list, so was Alicia's. But there were others, too. Lots of others. He's been running this scam for years, Karen said. Targeting couples, breaking them up, taking money from both sides. Sometimes he'd seduce the wife, sometimes the husband. Whatever worked. I flipped through the documents, my anger growing with each page. Bank records showing payments from desperate spouses who wanted their marriages destroyed. Photographs of affairs that had been staged for blackmail purposes. Contracts for services that should never have existed. How many couples? I asked. In this town? 12, Karen said. Across 3 states? Over 100? The scope of it was breathtaking. Nolan hadn't just been a small-time car dealer having an affair with my wife. He'd been running an organized operation, destroying families for profit. And Susie was his partner in all of this? His newest partner, Karen said, but not his only one. She pointed to another name on the list, Mrs. Tully. Our neighborhood watch coordinator was feeding him information about which couples were having problems, Karen said. She'd identify targets, and Nolan would move in. I stared at the documents, trying to process the magnitude of the conspiracy. Half the people I'd trusted had been working against me. Why are you showing me this? I asked Karen. Because I want them all destroyed, she said. Nolan ruined my life, took my money, left me with nothing. Susie helped him do it, and now I want revenge. What kind of revenge? The kind that makes sure they never hurt anyone else. I looked around the room at these people who'd been part of the plot to destroy my marriage. Danny, who'd introduced the players. Susie, who'd orchestrated the whole thing. Karen, who wanted vengeance against her ex-husband. And me, the target who'd become the predator. Here's what's going to happen, I said. We're going to use this information to destroy everyone who was part of this scheme. Not just Nolan and Susie, but all of them. How? Danny asked. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. We're going to give them a taste of their own medicine. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. The first was to the FBI's white-collar crime division. The second was to the state attorney general's office. The third was to a reporter I knew at the regional newspaper. What are you doing? Susie asked, panic in her voice. I'm making sure everyone knows exactly what you did, I said, and I'm making sure you pay for it. Joe, please, think about the baby. I am thinking about the baby, I said. I'm thinking about how it deserves better than a mother who destroys families for money. I walked to the center of the room and looked at each person in turn. Danny, you're going to cooperate fully with the investigation. You're going to testify about everything you saw and heard, and then you're going to leave town and never contact me again. My brother nodded miserably. Karen, you're going to turn over all of Nolan's records to the authorities. You're going to help them track down every victim, every co-conspirator, every piece of evidence. Gladly, she said. And Susie, I said, turning to face the woman who'd orchestrated my personal hell, you're going to confess to everything. You're going to plead guilty to fraud, conspiracy, and whatever else they charge you with. And you're going to do it publicly so everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I won't do it, she said. Yes, you will, I said, because if you don't, I'll make sure this information gets to your husband, your employer, your family, and everyone else in your life. I'll make sure you lose everything, just like you tried to make me lose everything. You can't prove I paid Nolan. I reached into the folder and pulled out a bank statement. Wire transfer from your account to his, dated 3 weeks before the hospital fundraiser. $5,000, just like Karen said. Susie's face went white. You kept records of your own crime, I said, just like your partner. I walked toward the door again, and this time no one tried to stop me. Joe, Susie called out, what happens now? I paused at the threshold and looked back at her one last time. Now you get to find out what it feels like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted, I said, just like you did to me. I walked out into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed me. But I wasn't done yet, because tomorrow the whole town would know the truth about what had happened, and everyone who'd been part of it would face the consequences. They'd called me a villain after the reunion incident. But sometimes the villain is just the last man standing when everyone else has shown their true colors. I got in Ray's truck and we drove back toward town, the lake house shrinking in the rearview mirror. Behind us, the lights went out one by one, as if the building itself was ashamed of the secrets it had harbored. Hell of a night, Ray said. Hell of a year, I replied. What's next? I thought about that as we wound through the dark forest, heading back to the town that had harbored so many lies and conspiracies. Next, I said, we make sure this never happens to anyone else. The headlights cut through the darkness ahead of us, illuminating the road home.